Hello, good evening, and welcome to Midweek Matters. Um, this
Um,
evening, this evening we are very pleased to have with us Lee Warner, who's one of the founders and directors at Better Mobility. Um, he's nearly 25 years ago, he and his wife had their world turned upside down, finding out that their son had cerebral palsy. They went through several pieces of heavy, non-user friendly equipment and were told that they could improve their lives. But actually, the equipment made everything a lot harder. So, finding that the equipment wasn't so easy to store or fold or transport, and really heavy to maneuver. So they, as a family of five, realized that things were becoming a little bit more difficult with the equipment as well. And they decided to take the matter into their own hands and find a better way and better equipment. And therefore, Better Mobility was born in 2003. Um, Lee and Natasha became determined to make better equipment more accessible, furthering their education on posture and management courses, seating and access courses, maintenance courses, and discovering new products. They've been in business now for over 21 years, supplying highly specialized wheelchairs to people all over the world, and now have a staff of over 15, running seating clinics in several private hospitals, and have seating specialists on the road and in their showroom to provide and demonstrate the latest equipment and the latest technology. Their almost 25-year-old son with cerebral palsy has recently graduated from university and now has joined them in the workplace as one of their employees. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Lee to Midweek Matters. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, I guess talking about wheelchairs is very important to me. It's always been well, for the last 25 years at least. It's always been a part of our lives, and it's it's quite incredible how much technology and um, progress has been made in wheelchairs, especially in the last 8 to 10 years. Um, Wheelchairs, sort of 8 to 10 years ago, were quite bulky and heavy, and but advances in engineering and materials and a lot more access to lightweight materials has made wheelchairs lighter, perform better, and usually more user friendly than they have been in a long time. Um, we have noticed specifically, I guess, since COVID. Everybody talks before and after COVID, really, but during COVID, the need for people to get outside, be more outdoorsy, made sort of a very big shift in the type of equipment that we started to supply. Um, Much more off-road equipment was being purchased. Much more power-assisted devices were being added to manual wheelchairs to make them a little bit easier for the users. Um, Propelling a wheelchair is not a natural movement. And for somebody who's young and starts life off in a wheelchair, to be expected to propel a wheelchair for their entire life is very hard on the shoulders. The vibrations that go through the wheelchair are likened to somebody driving a bulldozer all day. So the wear and tear on your joints, etc., it does make it takes its toll. And so a lot of technology has gone into trying to make chairs more comfortable, trying to make chairs lighter, more make them easier to propel, more efficient. And then the addition of power add-ons is taking a lot of the work out of having to propel long distances.
Mm.
Okay. They're not necessarily taking over short distances, but having to propel for 8 hours a day, and if you're going on a long journey, or if you're going to I don't know, the zoo for the day, or anywhere there where there's going to be a lot of strain on you, then these power assisted devices really make a big difference as to how far you can go, or perhaps make the day a little bit better because you don't get as tired as quick. People can stay out longer, or enjoy the day longer. So that's basically been the focus recently, is on power add-ons and making them smaller and lighter, and then the off-road market as well. I noticed that in the pictures, that when you went to Parliament, that one of the users was in a Trekinetic chair, which is an off-road chair. We have those chairs here, so the lights are terrible, aren't they? So it's this sort of off-road chair here. It's only it's unusual because it's a 3-wheeled wheelchair, but its off-road capabilities of going through mud, going across grass, rough terrain, are unlike any other wheelchair. There are other options where you have, for example, you've got a device like this. So I'm going to hold this up. This is called a Smart Drive. And a Smart Drive attaches to the back of a wheelchair, back of a manual wheelchair, and it takes over the pushing. So the individual in the chair can still be quite independent, but the device takes into account how much effort you put into each individual push. There's a couple of different versions of that. Then there are trike add-ons, which can you add to the front of a wheelchair, sort of kind of like almost like a motorcycle, and they have power added to them, and they take the effort out of pushing. Plus, they give the chair an added benefit because it lifts the small front wheels off the ground. So when the small front wheels are off the ground, the chair can go over rougher terrain, because it's the small front wheels that stop the chair from traversing grass. It's not the large rear wheels and how thin they are. It's the small front wheels, and their inability to get over the tiniest of the tiniest of curbs, or they dig into loose ground. Anybody who's got shingle driveways or has tried to propel across sand, would just, the front wheels just bury into the ground. So you've got things like, I'll show you this one here. Let me see, put that down. So you've got the Tri-Ride, which is a device which attaches to the front of a manual chair. And I don't know if you can see quite, but it lifts the front casters off the ground. Yeah. So it's now got that ground clearance that you need. And it's replaced these small wheels at the front with this large front wheel, which will go up and down curbs, which will get it through different places, across muddy terrains. And this device just detaches and attaches to the chair. Okay, so it can take your manual chair and make it a completely different off-road kind of vehicle. And then you've got a slightly different one. So I'll show you this one here. And this one is called the M-Pulse, and it's the same idea. Lifts the front casters off the ground, but this is a much sleeker urban use. So this would take all the effort out of going around a shopping center for the day.
So the first one looked a bit like a Harley Davidson. That one looks a
basically, yeah, doesn't it? So that's that one you would certainly use to go across the grass or rougher terrain. And in addition to that, as I was talking about vibration earlier. So this one also has loop wheels, which kind of funny looking wheels, but they're actually suspension.
Oh.
So I don't know if you can see the design very well on the picture, but the design of these three spokes is such that they act as a dampener, so that if I put enough force on that, they spring.
Wow.
And that spring softens the vibrations that wheelchair users feel throughout the day.
Mm.
So again, those vibrations would make it difficult to propel for long distances. They would certainly get your joints tired quicker, more inflamed. So that type of device would certainly help with that. Unfortunately, with every sort of improvement, there's usually a drawback. And the drawback with those particular wheels is they're heavy.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Mm.
So things aren't perfect yet in the wheelchair world, and it's unlikely that they ever will be perfect. But there's usually a solve for every need. Okay. It may bring up other issues, solving one need,
Mm.
but there usually is a solve for every need. Okay.
So if you're thinking about indoor versus outdoor wheelchair,
Mhm.
Are there certain things that you would say? I mean, obviously, you've just mentioned with the one with the three spokes that that's actually fantastic for suspension. So
Yeah.
if you are traveling distances, that might be very helpful. But is there something that you need to be mindful of if you're finding you need to use a wheelchair indoors?
So if you're using a wheelchair indoors, the main issue is going to be maneuverability.
Mm.
Okay. And the maneuverability of a chair depends on if you're going power or manual.
Mm-hmm.
And then the difference between manual chairs is you usually have folding manual chairs or rigid manual chairs. And the compactness that you get with a rigid chair usually makes them more maneuverable indoors.
Mm.
So much smaller turning circle, much smaller footprint, um, much lighter to maneuver, much lighter to lift. You generally get that with rigid chairs. Folding chairs, sort of the standard folding chair that you would tend to be issued with would be something like an Action 3, which has removable foot plates, which makes the chair longer overall.
Yeah.
So the longer the chair, the more difficult it is to maneuver indoors.
Mm.
They generally have quite large front casters.
Mm.
So the front casters on a wheel, while I just sort of slated them for being difficult to use outdoors and on grass and things, the smaller the front caster, the more efficient the user will be in the chair and the more maneuverable they will be.
Mm.
The larger the front caster, the more inefficient the chair is.
Mm.
So there's always a fine balance of maneuverability outdoors and maneuverability indoors.
Mm.
And so you have to balance the different, how much do I use it indoors? How much do I use it outdoors? And fit of the chair is something that you have to manage as well.
Mm.
And we quite often get asked to add an inch or 2 inches to the width of a wheelchair in case I go out in the winter and I need to wear a heavy coat. So
Oh.
let me get this right. We're going to spec the wheelchair for you to use 3% of the time, and we're going to compromise the other 97% of the use. And they go, yeah. And it's getting that compromise between the two. You want to fit the chair for 97% of the time and struggle for the 3%, not the other way around.
That's a very,
Um,
yeah, that's a really useful perspective to have, isn't it? Yeah.
so
Thank you.
when people say, "Oh, I need it to do this," just keep in mind, how often do I need it to do that?
Mm.
Okay, I need to be able to wear a winter coat. Well, do you work outdoors? Yes. Fair enough, right? So you might make the chair a little bit wider to accommodate winter clothes, or you might even have a chair that's got adjustable armrests.
Mm. Mm.
Okay, so you can slide them in and out a little bit. Um, so yeah, maneuverability indoors is a key factor in choosing something. And generally, if it's really good outdoors, um, there's especially in with power chairs. So power chairs, the more compact and tighter the chair is, the more maneuverable it's going to be indoors. Usually, the bigger and the bulkier the chair is, the better performance outdoors.
Yes.
But then it's a little bit more difficult indoors. You need to generally have an adapted house and adapted doors,
Mm.
adapted vehicles.
Mm.
Um, and we find that there's lots of people are purchasing what we would consider to be box chairs. So something you can buy in a box and have delivered to you from Amazon.
Oh.
Um, and they're generally inexpensive, but they offer very little support,
Mm.
and they're made for a specific job. And the specific job that they're made for is they fold up and can go on the back of a car. They're not made for posture.
Mhm.
They're not made for comfort. They're not made for going up and down curbs, but people are using them to do these things, and then they wonder why they don't do them, or they
So,
complain about them the way that they do them. And it's just sort of managing people's expectations as to what wheelchairs can and can't do.
so as you touched on seating and positioning
Mhm.
and posture support, can you just expand on that a little bit more? Because as to the type of chair that one would need to think about if you needed that extra postural support.
So if you need extra postural support, there's lots of different, and the postural support is, again, it can vary from person to person. So for example, I've got behind me this chair here. So this is a Permobil, and you can sort of see these thigh guides here. I don't know if you can see them very well.
Yeah.
I'm not very good with positioning the camera, but these thigh guides help to keep somebody's legs central,
Mm-hmm.
okay, as opposed to legs opening. You've got this chair here, which has lateral supports. If I can just bend it down and show the lateral support here. So you've got a
Mm.
lateral support there to help with side bend. And then you've got something like this one here, which has very deep laterals on it. If you can see
Oh,
the
yes.
laterals
Yes.
here, very deep. Okay. And those are on different powered wheelchairs.
Mm.
Okay. And then you've got backs like this one. So this is a J3 back. It's a deep contour. And again, it's got quite sort of deep contours on it to give lots of side to side postural support.
Mm.
Then there are other backrests, which can be, let me just, there's one. So on this manual chair, I don't know if the lights are going to play and give us a hard time, but on this manual chair, it's quite a short backrest.
Mm.
And but it still gives some lateral support. Now, the reason you'd want a short backrest is range of motion, being able to turn your upper body and reach behind you, being able to reach things on shelves. So for people who use a manual wheelchair, the backrest you don't really want above your shoulder blades, because when you propel a wheelchair, your shoulder blades come into play quite a bit, and you want them to be free and not be limited by a backrest. So a lot of manual wheelchair users who are considered to be active wheelchair users will have a very low back. And it's for that reason. So they have a lot more ability to turn and reach in the chair, and it keeps their shoulder blades free for propelling longer distances, more efficient, longer pushes.
One of our ambassadors is one of the Paralympic basketball players, so I'm assuming
Right.
they would be having those sorts of level of backs for the chairs to be able to.
Yeah, I mean, if you
the.
look at some of the wheelchair basketball chairs, their backrests are almost non-existent.
Yeah.
They basically just cover the top of the pelvis sometimes. So yeah, and that's so that they can really reach behind them, almost fold in half, to reach behind them and block shots or take passes or pick up loose balls. So that's why they have such low backs.
So
they're not generally supportive, but depending on the level of injury, or the level of ability, then you don't necessarily need that back.
So going to the other extreme, as you were taking us through this beautiful arrangement of the wheelchairs that you have, thinking about the pressure support for the bottom. I just wanted to explore a little bit with you about pressure mapping and who is the best person to assess that. What are the things that one needs to be mindful of when you're looking for that pressure support for a wheelchair?
So, pressure mapping, we do pressure mapping. We have a variety of different cushions, and different people will map differently. And pressure mapping helps you to determine if somebody's sitting with what we call an obliquity, or somebody's sitting with a pelvic rotation, or where the pressure is really going through. From there, you need to find a suitable cushion that's going to relieve as much pressure as you can. Pressure sores and pressure issues are a main concern with wheelchairs. And providing that you get the chair right, and depending on if you're using armrests, get the armrest right and the footrest right, then pressure should self-manage. But there are quite a lot of sort of, well, there's always exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, as long as those things are right, you should be okay pressure wise. If not, then you can, with the cushion, there are different cushions that offer different levels of protection. The most common type of cushion is foam. And then you can move up from a foam cushion to, well, some people just go to a deeper foam cushion. But what they don't tend to take into account is if you go to a deeper foam cushion, then you probably will have to raise your armrests and raise your foot plate. Otherwise, the deeper foam cushion is going to be too tall for you, and you're going to create actually more pressure going through it, because your armrests aren't going to be at the right height and your footrest isn't going to be at the right height. So you're adding weight so you're probably not really doing anything by just going to a thicker cushion. Then you can go up into memory foam, and then from memory foam cushions, you go to gel cushions, and there's various different inserts that you can put in gel cushions to help position right, so that pressure is good. And then from there, if you are still suffering from pressure, then there's air cushions. And air cushions have advantages and disadvantages. The advantages of air cushions are that they're very lightweight. Disadvantages are some air cushions require a lot more maintenance. They need to be checked weekly.
Mm.
And if they're not kept up to the right inflation, then they will probably be worse than just sitting on foam.
Mm.
The other problem sometimes with air cushions is some air cushions can be affected by temperature change.
Mm.
So colder temperatures, you will lose air pressure. Hotter temperatures, you will gain air pressure. And altitude changes. So if you fly a lot,
Wow.
your air cushion will behave differently when you're in the air as opposed to on the ground.
Mm.
And it will behave differently up the side of a mountain than it will at sea level.
Mm.
Some air cushions aren't affected by that, but some are. So you just have to be wary of which air cushion you take, which and make sure you understand that the volume of air that is in the cushion needs to be maintained.
And regarding the so your basic foam cushion is just a flat base, isn't it? But some of the cushions or the seating that I saw there had more sculpting. And does it depend
Yes.
on what the consistency of the cushion is made from? It depends on whether you need that contouring, or is it just
No, in my opinion, I've never come across anybody who's got a flat bum. Okay. All cushions should be contoured. As far as I'm concerned, all cushions should be contoured.
Mm.
When we sit down, we sit primarily on two bones in our bottom called our ITs, our ischial tuberosities. And those two bones actually, if you take a skeleton, those two bones at the bottom of your pelvis sit lower than your femur does.
Mm-hmm.
If you sit nicely and straight up, then those two bones will sit lower than your femur does. So a decent cushion should not be flat and should have what we call a pelvic well, somewhere for those ITs to sit into.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will see some of them had sculpting at the front, and those are just basically leg channels for your thigh bones or your femurs to sit into and keep a nice neutral position.
Mm.
Sometimes you get cushions where those features are exaggerated for people who might have involuntary spasms, so that they help prompt the leg to go back into position,
Mm.
and keep that leg in a nice neutral position. The worst thing you could do really is have legs rubbing against the foot plates or the leg rests on the chair, creating pressure sores that way, because you shouldn't be getting pressure sores on your legs from the hangers of the foot plates. So that's what we generally use that type of positioning in the cushion for, is to keep the legs in a nice neutral position.
That's brilliantly explained. And then if we go to the other side of the wheelchair, there was a lovely selection of different headrests. And
Yes.
I was just curious as to what the like you've taken us so beautifully through the world of cushions. Could you just give us a little quick journey through the world of headrests?
So the world of headrests, there's it can be a lot more complicated than cushions. Generally speaking, a headrest is there only for support. It's not to be relied on. If you think about people who drive cars, don't generally use a headrest when you're in your car. Your head doesn't touch it. And it should be very similar to that when you're in a wheelchair, especially if you're driving the wheelchair. Your head should be in a position where it's being supported by your own body. You do get situations where you need support from a headrest, or you need to rest on a headrest. And there are a couple of the headrests that I've got here. So if we look at this headrest, that's just a supportive headrest. It doesn't offer really any positioning. It's just got a slight curve to it, and we would set that headrest up so that an individual's it's about a centimeter to 2 centimeters away from their head. All right, so it's there if their head comes back, to protect against any sudden movements. And then you've got a headrest which has sort of 3 sections to it. Okay, actually I can take that one out. Maybe give a little bit better. So this headrest has, you can open and you can close it, and it just sits at the nape of the neck. All right, and it offers some head lateral support as well. All right. The problem that you find sometimes with headrests is, oh, those lights are terrible again, but the unless the individual is sat in exactly the same place every time they get in and out of the chair, then the headrest will almost inevitably always need adjusting. That's why wheelchairs should be quite tight, so that there's less scope for somebody to sit to one side, because if you, as soon as you move a little bit, the headrest is out of whack. There's if you slide slightly forward in the seat, the headrest is out of whack. Some chairs have backrest recline, so you've got a tilt feature in powered wheelchairs, and you've also got backrest recline, where the backrest just reclines. When you recline a backrest, you change the position of the headrest. You basically elongate it, and the headrest will go from the nape of the neck up to the top of the head. So it's going to need adjusting. With powered wheelchairs, and unless you're in a shopping center with a beautifully smooth marble floor, or you're at Wimbledon and you're on the courts and you're just driving around that lovely smooth grass, if you're on any of the pavements in the UK, or your head is going to move when you're in your wheelchair, whether it's a manual chair or a power chair. And if you've got a really tight fitting headrest, and some people have head straps so that their head doesn't fall forward, with people with very limited movement, then expect an awful lot of movement out of that headrest. It's all to do with levers and how far away the headrest is from the wheels, and how much more movement you're going to get at the headrest than you might get at the wheels. So the slightest bump in the wheelchair going over a little indentation in the pavement is going to be exaggerated at the headrest level. So headrests can be very, very finicky, very difficult to get absolutely spot on, and they always move. They always, yeah, they always move. They're always being adjusted, and unless you get somebody who's got the same sort of, especially if somebody's hoisted in and out of a chair, if they're hoisted by the same person every time, then the headrest is usually okay. If it's different people hoisting, then the headrest is almost always going to be out of whack.
I think it also makes sense now what you were saying about the cushion and that sculpting to help keep the pelvis and the legs all in alignment. So if it's like stacking blocks of, going upwards, if you've got the bottom right, then you've got more chance of everything else being aligned.
Yes, because seating, our head will always try and find a position, and this goes for everybody. Our head will always try and find a position above the pelvis. So if you sit if you move your bottom to the front of the seat and you sit down in a chair, our head will automatically come forward. Okay. If you lean to one side. You might lean to one side, but your head will try and come back above your pelvis. Now, that's all well and good for somebody who's got lots of movement and doesn't have any restrictions on their movement, because we can readjust ourselves. But for somebody who doesn't have that ability to reposition themselves, okay, if they're in that position for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, then their back starts to mold that way, and their kyphosis starts to become fixed, and their scoliosis starts to become fixed, and then it becomes a lot more difficult to accommodate their positions and to fix the positions. So yeah, if you have a wheelchair that's too wide for you, the body will try and find a third anchor point. So your first two anchor points are your bony prominences in your pelvis, your backside, and then the third is usually an arm. And you'll lean on that arm. So if your armrests aren't at the right height, you'll lean.
Yeah.
Okay. It needs that third reference point, our body, to feel safe. And if you don't have that third reference point, the body doesn't feel safe, and it tries to find it, and it'll find it by leaning. It'll find it by doing something to get there. I had a little experiment at I was at a private hospital a couple of weeks back, and I was talking to one of the therapists about this situation, and I said, if you and there was maybe 10, 12 people in the room, and they were all sitting on stools, and they were all working at their own workstations, etc. And I said, every one of those people, despite the fact that they're sitting down, is anchoring themselves with their feet. And she looked around, and every person was anchoring themselves with their feet. So it was that third point of reference. Nobody's feet were dangling. They were all using their feet to anchor themselves. So it's as long as you can seated and you've got 3 points of reference, then you should be able to sit in a nice upright position. It's when you don't have those 3 points of reference that you tend to lean, and once you start to lean, it can become fixed.
And is that where those side pads that you
the lateral supports can help with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so they can help prevent the lean. Some people, it'll be muscle tone that prevents them from sitting upright, or movement. So the lateral supports on the chair just act as like little cuddles, just to give them that support that they need to sit upright.
That's really makes a lot of sense. So what I'd like to do is take us just stepping outside again to just discuss outdoor mobility, and thinking about a couple of things regarding the pros and cons of electric chairs versus a scooter. What do you need regarding the highway code and the DVLA if you're going to be, motorizing yourself outdoors? And is there an age restriction like there is for drivers in cars?
Hey, I used to be fully up to date on all of that. You've kind of caught me off guard.
Oh, sorry.
To my knowledge, the only restriction as far as whether or not you can use a motorized vehicle on the road is some class 3 scooters need to be registered and taxed. Okay. Right. To my knowledge, you do not need insurance. And to my knowledge, there's no age restrictions.
Right.
There are restrictions on what type of vehicle can be used on the road, and there are restrictions as to what type of vehicle can be used on the pavement. Pavement use of vehicles in scooters is limited to 4 miles per hour. Road use of scooters, you must have as far as I know, you must have an 8 mile per hour capability scooter. You must also have rear view mirror, and you must also have lights.
Mm.
Any powered wheelchair above 4 mile an hour is supposed to have lights and indicators.
Mhm.
But to my knowledge, powered wheelchairs and scooters are considered different vehicles, and there's no limit to the speed or road use of powered wheelchairs.
Mm.
Okay, it's been a long time since I've checked that code, but that's sort of what I remember. It's not something I deal with on a day-to-day basis
No,
anymore.
it's fine. I'm just trying to have the whole spectrum of things that might um, be mindful, things that we might be mindful of, because I think also one of the challenges that our community have, if you haven't been a wheelchair user from when you were in under 18, is that you then maybe hit this mobility decline in your sort of like 30s 40s, where you have this fluctuating mobility situation, and you suddenly think actually a wheelchair would be really useful, but you then have to think about, right, what do I need my wheelchair for? And if it's outdoor mobility, it's like, well, what are the options there? So I just thought I'd throw it
The
in there.
the biggest concern that you sort of have to deal with if you were talking about scooters or wheelchairs, or scooter or powered wheelchair, would be your your um, your ability to drive a powered wheelchair is slightly different in your ability to drive a scooter. Powered wheelchairs are, for the most part, operated by a joystick. And if you don't have the necessary dexterity to operate a joystick, you might be able to operate a scooter tiller.
Mm.
The scooter tiller requires slightly less, I don't want to say effort, but slightly less cognitive ability maybe than the joystick. It's when you driving a scooter is a little bit more habitual because you've got a steering wheel basically.
Mm.
Um, some people will find that driving a powered wheelchair, unless you've played hours of video games, can be quite daunting to drive a powered wheelchair. The movements can be difficult to grasp, and certainly found that with older generation of people. Younger generation of people, like I said, if you've spent hours playing video games, then joysticks aren't a problem. But sort of older generation will like the tiller feel, and especially if you've driven a car previously, you might find that the tiller and the scooter feel a lot more like driving a small car than driving a powered wheelchair. Some people like the protection that they feel they get from a scooter because there's something in front of them, whereas in a powered wheelchair there's nothing in front of you. It's your legs are going to be the first thing that comes into contact with anybody else. So it's and it depends on the need for the mobility. So a powered wheelchair is something that is generally used all day every day, and the batteries and the motors and all of that is geared towards being used all day every day. A scooter is more designed to be used occasionally, and the batteries are designed to be used occasionally as opposed to every day, all day. Transporting a scooter and transporting a wheelchair can be two completely different things. Some people will use a scooter to replace a car. Some people will to use the scooter to get from their house into town and then back to their house. They may be semi-ambulant, may be able to walk a few steps, which the scooter will be a little bit easier to do that with. Some people will just have a mindset that they want a scooter over a powered wheelchair. And some people will refuse to go into a scooter. So it's a large part of it is down to preference.
Yeah.
As to, and then preference and application. The application for scooters can be somewhat different than, you can't use a scooter indoors.
No, fair point.
No, the turning ability of a scooter is nowhere near what it is in a powered wheelchair. So they're very difficult to maneuver indoors. And if you're only going to be using it outdoors or in shopping centers with really wide aisles, or then scooters can offer a little bit more. I don't know. Generally, they come with baskets, so you can put things in them, and you don't have to carry things on your lap all the time. And they've got that there's a little bit more presence about them, but they're a lot less money than powered wheelchairs. So I mean,
they have their pros and cons, don't they?
Absolutely.
I can hear the purpose specific as well.
Yeah, and it's like that with, even if when you go powered wheelchairs, manual wheelchairs, almost everything has a pro and con.
Yeah.
When you consider a rigid manual wheelchair is a lot more user efficient because it's lighter, there's no frame twist, but it doesn't fold, so that's your con. You want a chair that folds, no problem, but it's not going to be as efficient as one that doesn't. So yeah, there's lots of pros and cons, and unfortunately nobody has invented the perfect wheelchair yet, because the amount of times we get asked for a chair that gives all the postural support that you need, and does all of the tilt and the seat rise, and you can lift it up and put it in the back of a car on your own. It just doesn't exist yet. And I mean, you and I had the conversation just before about how many pairs of shoes do you have? Some people have multiple wheelchairs because that's their shoes. So you'll have a wheelchair that will act as your welly boots. It's an off-road type of wheelchair that you can go through mud and go out in the rain in. And then you might have something that's equivalent of a pair of dress shoes, where you can, it's all in nice color, and it's all sort of looks shiny and I don't know, kind of fancy. And then you might have a powered wheelchair that you do all your distance in, to save your shoulders. So there's lots of different applications, and very rarely is one chair able to do all of the things that an individual wants it to do, just the same as one pair of shoes would not be enough for me. I would need to have a pair of shoes for different occasions.
That really, really good analogy. So before I open up to the rest of the chat, the community on the chat, I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what is the benefit of having a properly assessed wheelchair assessment when you need a wheelchair?
And I'm not going to name any names, but I watched a YouTube video the other day. It was actually highlighted in a news feed that I saw, and it was an individual, a wheelchair user, who was slating the wheelchair that they purchased. And then they were disgusted with this after sales service that they received. And the whole story, or the whole reason that I bring this up, is you bought equipment and tried to do with it what it's not made for. And if you don't have, by all means, people are more than welcome to go onto Amazon or websites and buy something online and just hope that it's going to be suitable for them. And you can save a little bit of money by doing that, and maybe you'll get it right, maybe you won't. But the point is that this individual bought something online and they broke it within a week of using it. And they took a video of what they did with it and then tried to claim it under warranty. And of course, if you crash your car, you can't claim it under warranty. You might be able to claim it under insurance, but you can't claim it under warranty. And they tried to claim this breakage under warranty, and then the manufacturer or the person that sold it to him says, no, it's not a warranty issue. You crashed it. You used it for something that it wasn't meant to be used for. So, and then that company and the manufacturer of the wheelchair is being slated because of what happened. And the individual didn't get a proper assessment. If she had a proper assessment, then they might not have been suggested that they buy that particular chair. They were using the chair for something that it wasn't designed to be used for. And if without a proper assessment, you will not end up with the right equipment. And I'm not saying that even sometimes with a proper assessment, expectations have to be managed of what the wheelchair can and can't do. And as long as we try and manage expectations, then we've done our job as assessors and try and get the right equipment. And I mean, sometimes it's really difficult to go out and have the perfect example of what an individual requires. But we do try. But sometimes it's a case of, okay, well, you need a 42 centimeter by 44 centimeter wide wheelchair, but we've only got a 40 centimeter wide chair. And I can demonstrate that to you, because if I had a size of chair for every different model we had, we'd be in a warehouse the size of Amazon. And we'd never find anything, and it'd just be chaos. But we try and get it as close to what you would use as possible. Some chairs have adjustments in them, so that even if you don't get it exactly right, there are some adjustments that you can do to make the chair a little bit more what we would call tippy, or make it a little bit more passive. Some chairs don't have that ability. The ability to adjust adds weight to a chair, and it adds things that can creak and things that can loosen. Whereas a rigid chair with no adjustment, none of those things happen. You don't get any loose bits. You don't get any creaks and rattles.
So I suppose my question to you then is, if you know you're going for a wheelchair assessment, it's useful for the person going to know what it is they need their wheelchair for, and what it is that they are concerned about regarding their posture, their pressure areas, their, what their stability support that they normally need anyway.
A good assessor will ask those questions.
Right.
A good assessor will say, will ask, what are your postural needs? What are your pressure needs? Some users won't know. Sometimes they may use the services of an occupational therapist. The good things about occupational therapists is they can help an individual to provide to give them answers, but sometimes they think that the occupational therapist knows everything there is to know about wheelchairs, which isn't always the case. It's not their job to know about wheelchairs. It's their job to know about you. So it's some of the better appointments can be in conjunction with an occupational therapist. But as long as you've got an assessor who is familiar with what they're doing and knows the product, then you should be okay. And you don't, I mean, it's up to you if you want to spend extra money hiring the services of somebody else, but it's not always necessary.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much, Lee. I think I've exhausted my list of queries and questions that I've come up with so far. So I'd like to, we've had some lovely comments in the chat, but before we go to any of the comments and queries there, is there anyone, I noticed, Sarah, you've got your hand up.
Yes.
Would you like to ask your question to Lee?
First of all, I've had many chairs. I've had 2 or 3 power chairs, and they've been private. The first one kept breaking down all the time. And basically, I used to be like a Ferrari. Like with my chair, I used to run around. I burnt them out. I burnt the motors out. And and I used to like fall out my chair, coming out of clubs sometimes, and I used to go really racing because I could walk as well. But then I got spinal stenosis and it stopped me walking. So now I can't walk at all. And I've got a new chair, a quad, anyway, and it's quite
Quantum.
fast. Yeah, quantum. Yeah, quantum. It's really fast and that. But I'm so careful now because I'm 50, you know. I'm a lot more careful. But what my question is, I keep going to the side. Like I'm always like sliding to the side. And I've got a bracket, but it's bent because I'm moving to one side all the time. I mean, I can sit up now, but when I go out on the pavements and it and like little bumps and that, it moves my bottom to the other way. So I'm struggling to go up the wheelchair. But another thing, I am getting a new wheelchair, a non-private wheelchair, and they've got a mold, like a beanbag, and you sit in it and it might find out where you need support. But my head, because I've been leaning to one side a lot, my head's going one way automatically.
Right.
Yes.
So is your question, Sarah, to Lee, is there what would he
what would you
recommend to think about regarding that alignment of your
my private wheelchair, because I've had a bracket put in and I've had padding, but it's too close to the gear stick. So even though I'm sat upright, the padding is too much. So my gear stick, you know, it interferes with that. So you suggest what I can do? Yeah, Solaris. It's a weakness of the muscle of the hip.
Right. So, I mean, I would probably start by looking at what's happening with your pelvis. If you're leaning to one side, it's quite possible that you've got what we would call an obliquity, and you might need a buildup in one side of the cushion, as opposed to having great big lateral pads added to the chair. but that's where I would start. Um,
What kind of
but each
cushion?
individual is different, and it's really hard for me to say what the actual problem is. But if you've got, so you're getting another chair from Wheelchair Services?
Yeah, but it's taking forever.
Yeah, that's
Um,
the problem.
but I'm in a private wheelchair at the moment,
Right. But
and
did they suggest anything at Wheelchair Services? Did you speak to an OT?
yeah, well, yeah, did. I've got a specialist, a rehabilitation specialist, but he
Right.
wasn't there, and they granted me another electric wheelchair. But they won't interfere with private chairs,
No,
so they won't like alter it or
no, they won't.
anything. So, but I need to find another something to support my
But
hip.
so, Sarah, I just to add, with my physio hat on, that makes a lot of sense what Lee's saying about how, if the bones that you sit on, you have that well because they're normally, more even. But actually, if you're tilting one way because of a weakness and you build that bit up, then it brings it up to that same level. It might just help with getting the straightness,
I
so
think
you don't get so fatigued. Those muscles don't get so fatigued when you're.
Miriam's right.
So like
And
a cushion.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think you might be better off, as opposed to just adding more padding or more um, side padding to the chair, to the backrest, that you might be better off speaking to somebody who is able to assess you in what your pelvis is doing. Pressure management or pressure mapping might help with that, to see if you are putting more pressure through one side than the other, and then they can even the pressure out, so that you don't tend to lean to one side. But that's certainly where I would start, is looking at the cushion and what your pelvis is actually doing.
Brilliant.
Okay,
Really good
thank
advice.
you.
Thank you, Lee. Before I go to having a look at the.
Can
course.
I just add one thing with regards to cushions? The amount of times that I have seen cushions that have been placed back inside their cover sideways, backwards, upside down is frightening. And please, if you've ever washed the cover of your wheelchair cushion, make sure that it goes back the same way it came out. There is a front and a back and an up and a down for almost every wheelchair cushion. And if you get it wrong, you will be in all kinds of trouble.
Wise guidance. Brilliant. Thank you. So is there anyone else at this moment that want to ask anything? I can't see any hands going up at the moment, so I'm going to go to the chat. And in the chat, we've got a few comments. Becky, thank you for putting in the link to the smart drive for Tony. Julia said the place where Lee is looks like a Santa's grotto. Abby's tried the tri ride and she found it very fast.
Yes.
And also an RGK. I have an RGK with a J cushion.
Yeah.
Um,
So do I.
There you go.
I've got one here.
What's an RGK? Just for
An RGK is a lightweight, rigid manual wheelchair.
Right. Okay, that's really useful.
So they are one of the most customizable chairs that you can make.
Right.
So when you're prescribing an RGK, you almost need a compass and a protractor to work out the angles.
Right.
It can be that specific.
Okay, that's very detailed, isn't it? And when I think Julia's comment came up when we were talking about outdoor wheelchairs and scooters, because she said that she didn't understand why the wheelchair services insist on putting her feet out in front of her instead of underneath her, which actually makes a lot of sense.
So, sorry, powered wheelchair or manual wheelchair?
Julia, which one is that?
Actually, both, but more the power chair.
More the power chair.
Yeah.
So the power chair, it's very difficult to tuck your feet underneath in a power chair because of that's generally where the batteries are kept. The depending on what other options you have on the chair, the actuators are kept. So to tuck your feet underneath, or well, I wouldn't say really tuck them underneath, but to tuck your feet as much as possible in a powered wheelchair is a lot more difficult than in a manual wheelchair. Powered wheelchairs, your sitting position in them tends to be a lot more passive than you would have in an aggressive or an active manual wheelchair. An active manual wheelchair, if you want to almost sit forward, tuck your feet underneath you, be in almost like an aggressive position to really push through everything. If you look at the way that any wheelchair racer sits in their chair, they're very hunched over, legs almost tucked right underneath them, as aerodynamic as possible and as aggressive as possible. That's extreme, and you wouldn't want to sit like that every day. But the better the position you are to give yourself effective propulsion, the more effective your propulsion will be. So that's why, sort of, if your feet are tucked underneath you, you're in a. It's sort of like a runner coming out of the blocks. If you wouldn't see a runner coming out of the blocks lounging in their settee or anything, would you? They want to be aggressive. They need to be in a kind of almost like a pounce stance. And that's what you get with an active manual wheelchair. Powered wheelchairs tend to be a lot more passive, so you wouldn't need to sit in sort of that aggressive stance. Okay.
Brilliant. Becky assumed that a bespoke seating support is not possible on a scooter. Is she correct in her thinking?
Controversial.
Oh, Becky.
It can be done.
That's not unusual. I'm quite often controversial. So
absolutely.
Generally speaking, scooters come out of the box and are put together as they are. You can do some alternate seating on a scooter, but it's not the norm.
I just know in my experience, although I can walk, I ended up with a power chair because actually the seating position for a scooter was making my muscle spasticity quite bad.
Right.
To try and drive it and be sat in that position.
So you won't find many people.
Was...
You won't find many people will alter the seat on a scooter, but it is possible.
Okay, so staying with scooters, Anna has asked, what is the lightest scooter available? And if you don't have the answer today, that's absolutely fine. We can come back to you.
There's so many new products coming to the market. It changes almost daily. I mean, I think I got an email from somebody today for I know it's not a scooter, it was a powered wheelchair, but a powered wheelchair from 11.7 kilograms. And it's just it's constantly changing, and it depends on what you want to do with it as to what I would suggest is lightweight. So sometimes the lighter scooter or the lightest scooter available isn't always the lightest to lift because it doesn't come apart. So you have to lift it as one piece. Some scooters that they have an auto fold device and they fold up and become nice to store, but you have to lift them as one piece. Some other scooters, which their overall weight might be heavier, they come apart into 5 or 6 different pieces. And the weight of each individual piece is lighter to lift than the lightest scooter is. So it depends on what your aim is. If your aim is to be able to lift the lightest thing, then you might need one that comes apart. Because even if it doesn't come apart, but it's really lightweight, it's probably something that's really awkward to lift. Okay. And if it's really light to lift, just be careful where you use it.
Yes.
Right.
No strong winds.
No strong winds. You don't want to be anywhere where it could be slightly off balanced. That type of machine would be recommended for shopping centers. Okay. Not really outdoor use if it's so lightweight that it can be lifted in one go. So things that make things lightweight are small wheels, low center of gravity, really small battery capacity, small motors. So going up hills is going to be difficult. Range you're going to find is going to be different. Weight capacity. Some machines that have really lightweight capabilities might only be good up to 15 stone in weight or 16 stone. So that you have to factor that in as well.
Comes back to your pros and cons and limitations. And so an interesting thing, which I think really demonstrates the spectrum of the presentation of cerebral palsy is someone wrote about how they found it, like you mentioned, hard going from a normal electric joystick that they used all their childhood to something like a tri-ride, where it's a completely different mechanism for coordinating your navigating your travel. And I think it just shows the different options there are, but also what you start learning with and how hard it can be to learn a new skill when you've had it wired into you for so many, for a number of decades. Also, Tony wanted to acknowledge that the assessment requires a deep knowledge of the area and the equipment available and a lot of skill. So which was very sweet. And finally, it was quite an entertaining one to finish on, I think. Lee's comments near the start about wheelchair maneuverability within the house makes me think I need to move as soon as possible. My wife will be overjoyed. She's been nagging me for years. So I think at that point, unless there's anyone else who've got any burning questions that you haven't.
Can I ask just one question?
Of course, off you go, Emma.
I have been listening intently and I might have missed this, so I apologise. But I just thought, just going back to people like myself who aren't regularly in chairs, would there be, and obviously, and I'm the sort of person potentially that is bought out of the box because when I needed one, it was just, what can I get? Is there a recommendation of something that might fit the bill for the kind of occasional use more than something that you use every day? Or what should
Absolutely.
we be looking for?
Absolutely. So, but it's occasional use.
Yes.
And I had this situation just the other day here, and somebody came in, and they're very, very uncomfortable in the wheelchair that they bought. And so I looked at it, and they bought a wheelchair online. No, I've no problem with that. But they didn't get measured for it. It's not even close to being appropriate for her. And she said, but we only use it occasionally. I said, okay, so what's occasionally? Well, whenever I go to the hospital for a doctor's appointment, and I end up sitting in the hospital sometimes for 6-7 hours. I said, okay, so that's not really occasional. If you're in a chair for 6 or 7 hours, even if it's only 1 day a week, that's a little bit more than occasional. Occasional to me is if you, if I was going to take my nan to the shops and she can't walk very far, but I push her for an hour a day walking around the shops, that's occasional use. If I don't know, if I only go to see her once a week or once a month, then that's occasional use. If you're sitting in a chair for 6 or 7 hours a day, it's you need to be in something that's going to be a little bit more supportive and comfortable, and maybe the right size, as opposed to trying to being comfortable and being occasional can be two completely different things. And like I said, if it's just an occasional use chair and you're going out for an hour and you can't walk long distances, but when you get to wherever you're going to transfer to a seat in a restaurant, you're going to transfer to a car seat, then that's an occasional use chair, and go online and buy one. I mean, you can buy them for 150 pounds, on 200 pounds. I would always make sure that there's two things. You have a cushion with it. All right. Even if it is occasional, have a cushion. And the other really important thing, and the thing that I almost stop people so I can go and adjust their foot plates, is make sure your foot plates are the right height.
Mm-hmm.
And your thighs should be level with the ground. Like they shouldn't be around your ears, and you shouldn't be lounging in a chair. Your feet should be comfortable and neutral and level with the ground, or perpendicular with the ground.
It's that 90
degrees.
90,
yeah, I mean, that's
90.
ideal.
Yeah.
But not everybody can sit at 90 degrees anyways.
Yeah, true.
But the amount of people that I see, and so if your foot plates aren't at the right height, you put extra weight through your sitting bones,
Mm-hmm.
and it will mean you will get more uncomfortable a lot quicker.
Mm.
Okay. And uncomfort is fine if you can sense that you're getting uncomfortable and you can feel that. But uncomfortable, if you can't feel it, is a problem, and it will lead to pressure problems.
Thank you. I was thinking along the lines of something that I always advocate, which is having a toolbox of different equipment for different uses.
It's usually a very simple adjustment to adjust the foot plates, but I mean, the amount of people that I see going around with improperly or not adjusted foot plates, and I just think, somebody came to me the other day, and it was, oh, but the foot plates are high, so we can get up and down the ramp in front of the house. And I said, well, that's all well and good, but either your ramp isn't long enough, or she's going to be uncomfortable. So that's your compromise. Your compromise is comfort over going up and down the ramps. And it's just what you have to do.
There we go. There's a job for Miriam on Monday. Thank you very much.
Another comical comment before we wrap it up is all this talk about positioning. Abby's moved herself back in the chair so she's her bottom sitting properly. All this
Well done.
I would like to say a big thank you on behalf of everyone here this evening, and to sharing with us your knowledge, your experience, and in such a really practical way with all the equipment you've got there, and sharing all that with us. It's really been a fascinating and informative talk. So thank you so much, Lee, and everyone
You're
at
welcome.
Better Mobility. Really appreciate that.